You're listening to a Mel and Kim Productions podcast. What happens when a lawyer and a family mediator step into a bar? Join us to find out. Dianne and Paula have real conversations about the family law process in Australia. Whether you're a part of the family law system or about to engage in the process, find out what the realities versus perceptions are. Dianne and Paula don't hold back on their individual perspectives and experiences.
We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast today and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Welcome back to a lawyer and a mediator walk into a bar. This week we want to have a chat about the differences in relation to drafting consent orders or court orders and a parenting plan and how they differ and the various, where they're useful and where they're not. My colleague Paula.
Well, where there are positives, where there are negatives, where are things to just look out for.
Yeah.
There are legal terms to it. There are the mediation terms to it. But they all have meanings.
Yeah.
And they do all have some aspect of resolution. And that's what we're all looking for here.
And again, I suppose what people need to be aware of right from the outset is that FDR mediation is now mandatory. So coming up with some sort of parenting arrangement where there are children involved is important initially. But even if you have consent orders or court orders and you want those changed, my understanding, Paula, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there is this concept of significant or substantial change that must be met before you can change a court order or a court order or a consent order. But alternatively, you can come back to mediation, negotiate an adjustment or a variation to a clause in your orders, and that then can be drafted into your existing orders.
Right. So I guess to be very clear, when you go into mediation, right, you can get a parenting plan. And especially when the children are young and prior to school, that is a really great concept to me. Because you can just go back to you and say, okay, well, this isn't really working. Let's come back to another quick half-day mediation maybe, and let's work out some of the bugs from the original one. Yep. We have the one matter that's gone back to you 3 or 4 times before it eventually came to me. But again, it only came to me with one matter, one thing to actually argue about. The rest of it was pretty easy. It was easy because it was already discussed. And they'd come back to you several times. So that's the beauty of a parenting plan, is that you can make those changes as agreed. You've got a third party as in the mediator to come back to and say, let's have this chat. And you go back through the process again. But at that point, you understand the process. You know that this is the first step. And it may be the last step in many ways. If you don't have to go beyond that, why would you? Yeah. So it is something that as it works, it works.
It can work extremely well. And I do believe its strength, the strength of a parenting plan is that it is quickly and easily reviewed.
And that the parties come to that agreement themselves.
Oh, yeah. It's very powerful when you're sitting there and only the things both of you agree to are drafted into that document.
Right. And that's the whole thing, is that, it's just what you guys have agreed to. But so one of the weaknesses of a parenting plan, though, is that the other side can just drop off the face of the earth and not follow any of it. But many times parents, they really just need that third person. Sometimes in the old, I hate to say the old days, but previously you would have a family friend, or there'd be a family, the mother, the grandparent that could come in and you could have that kind of conversation with as a family. And for whatever reason, to me, that has broken down a bit. Yeah. So just the idea that it's like, well, let's just go to the mediator. Let's just hammer it out. We've got a third person who's going to tell us, not going to tell us right from wrong, but they're going to tell us if we're way over the top, or just help us manage the expectations. And, it is less intrusive. It's obviously less costly. Significantly less costly. Let me throw that in there. Yeah. Significantly less costly. But the idea is sometimes you just need somebody in the middle to help manage each side. Yeah. And if parties know that they can go back then the strength of that parenting plan is that they know they can go back, and this is the process. They've agreed to the process, and it has a way of working.
Yeah.
Now, again, the challenge on that is that what if it just breaks down all the way around?
Okay.
You know?
And I think for my part, the interesting conversation there is, okay, so what's called a breach order, if you have consent orders or court orders, and the other party doesn't comply, what's the process?
Oh, it's ugly.
So many of my clients think they just ring up the police and say, can you come and grab my child because I have orders and
I want a recovery.
Yeah.
I need to go get but it's traumatic. Mm-hmm. It is very traumatic. It's traumatic to the child because they don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take them to be very old. I mean, they could be 3 years old and they're understanding there's a conflict.
Oh, yeah.
The trauma of having a kid, the police show up, the kid the parent's either there to pick up the child, the other parent, or the police are putting the kid in the back seat of the car to take him back to the other parent. But a parenting plan, there is no enforcement like that. And that to me, where people are like, well, I have the parenting plan, and the police are like, sorry, it's not an order, it's not a court order,
Yeah.
we can't help you.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things to be aware of, but it's one of those things again. If it's working, it's working.
Yeah.
Keep working it.
But it's I suppose, in my experience, it's very rarely that the police get involved.
Yeah, let's keep in mind these are our experiences.
Yes, it's our experiences. So, that it's very rarely that the police get involved. And I actually had a matter recently where one party, and I'm keeping this completely gender neutral, one party completely ignored the orders to the point where they ended up with a good behaviour bond. Once the good behaviour bond was over, they had taken a job in country Victoria, picked the child up and moved to
take
country.
over. Yeah.
So the other parents' options are very, very limited, and the cost of initiating a breach order.
Well, you're initiating an application to the court.
Yeah.
So if you have a parenting plan and you've gone that route, and the other party decides that they're not going to pay attention to any of it, they've redone everything, and they're almost like egging you on to file an application in the court. But if you go through the process and there is a consent order, then you do have to go back. You have to start an application in the process. It's not just something that the paperwork alone. I think I counted there was like 8 to 9 documents that have to be filed.
Oh, wow.
Just to start things, and that doesn't include your affidavit, which can be another 25 pages. But the whole point is that then it becomes the process more so than the people.
Yeah.
There's just no other way around it in law. And the idea, in my mind, that it's a societal justice that says we have all these processes and procedures so that everybody has a fair go, right? I mean, that's the concern.
That's the ideal.
That's the idea. Well, the idea is that everybody has a fair go.
Yeah.
But again, in order to get to that point, you're probably laying out $5,000. Just to get those documents started and filed in the court, much less the filing fees. Nothing happens quickly unless you have to file for something urgent, and then you have to make a letter to the court explaining why it's urgent. Why is this? And
that's very young children or
threats
of
violence, or threats of violence toward the child, or they took the child and you don't know where he is.
Moving interstate.
Yeah. So there's all these. Again, these are all the Armageddon scenarios.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they do happen. There was a situation a long time ago where the parties, they had a parenting plan. They were doing great, came back, to the mediator 2 or 3 times. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one party decides they didn't like any of it, and they took off. Took the child and took off. And it's like, where do they go? I don't know. Are they in the country? I don't know.
It's scary. That's so scary for the other parent.
And unnecessary.
Yeah.
Again, the claim is always about that. There's some sort of violence involved. But we can have another conversation. About what it means. Because emotional, psychological, and physical abuse are all very real, very tangible,
and financial.
Yes. That's become a very big player now. And it's very apropos. Back in my day, all of years ago. But let's just say in the 80s, if the husband had the accounts and you didn't, it wasn't abnormal. It wasn't unusual. It was kind of like that was the thing.
I spent a bit of time trying to explain the reasons why the legislation has shifted the way it has and why things are couched now the way they are, because in the old days, like when my mother left my father in the 70s, she couldn't even buy a car without a man's signature. And it's not that long ago.
No, and it's very frightening.
She couldn't get a loan. There was her lifestyle and her ability to look after us just plummeted. She worked 2 jobs in order to maintain a basic lifestyle for us.
Well, that's even funny because we'll do another episode about the gray separation.
Oh, yes.
About folks in their 50s and 60s and even 70s.
Yeah.
Have
had them.
just had enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what they grew up with as the norm.
Yeah.
And they just thought, that they would be cared for.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and they're in their 70s, why wouldn't they be?
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, they're fighting over who's going to get the pensions. They're going to fighting over who gets the superannuations, who's, and who's getting the house. And, but at that age, how do you start over? But that's become more prevalent as well. But the whole idea really is that there is the legal process, there is the mediation process. How do they work hand in hand? And when it comes to dealing with the court and having, like you said, the biggest thing we've noticed has been with the parenting, for the most part, because that's where a lot of the ongoing challenges occur.
Yeah.
So it comes down to, are there other processes? Yes. Are there other less expensive processes? Absolutely. But at the same time, just have to be aware that things can occur to upset that apple cart. And throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. All these colloquialisms.
But the whole idea that people come to mediation, often I see people and they're, weeks, sometimes days into their separation.
Yeah, very early on.
The emotions are incredibly heightened. They're not in a clear space. I can get them in to mediate a parenting plan within 2 weeks, let's say, 2-3 weeks.
Which is a much better wait than the court.
A much better wait than the court, absolutely. But you're dealing with people who are in a heightened emotional state.
Well, some are in just crisis mode.
Completely. And terrified.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrified. How am I going to manage this moving forward? So often the parenting plan that we produce has to be an interim. It has to be let's put something in place just for now, see how it works, let's come back. If it doesn't work, that's fine. You're new at this. You're newbies. Nobody's given you a handbook on when you had the kids, and nobody's given you a handbook now on how to be good co-parents. My job is to try and help you down that pathway, and I do try to make myself redundant.
Perfect. Yeah.
Give people the skill set in order to do this for themselves. That's the ideal. But you're right. The process is there if people need to come back. What I think we need to touch on is, if I am, I think issuing a 60I certificate is a complete fail. I don't like doing it. But
there's a whole issue with that certificate.
Yeah. Well, if I do, what I'm basically doing is handing the problem to somebody else. And depending on the dynamic, I'm often taking one party out of the frying pan into the fire, if you get my gist.
Yeah,
yes, because...
Yeah, again, that's the process, unfortunately.
Yeah, because that's the process, exactly. So it's important to know that the certificate can be issued on 5 different grounds. So the first is a failure to attend. So my role is to invite the other party to attend, and if they don't attend, I issue the certificate saying that the other party failed to attend. Now, I've got to give them a written invitation, and I've got to try and contact them at least twice.
So there's protocols to even get to that. Yeah.
If we initiate mediation and then a party doesn't make a genuine effort, again, I can issue a certificate. So
what is that? What is a genuine? And it's like, oh, I showed up. Isn't that a genuine effort?
Sorry, I'm knocking my thing again. Maybe we'll make this a running joke. Like I bounce the mic around. So I'll give you an example. I had a couple attend. They had a child who was about to go to secondary college. Mum wanted to explore a number of ideas. They had 50-50 shared care of this boy. She wanted to explore a number of ideas around, she wanted to send the child to private school. Or no, it wasn't just private school, it was any school. But the dad was adamant the moment it was a school with a religious bent.
Okay.
No negotiation. Would not enter. Would not.
Not even
Not
think
wouldn't,
about
Wouldn't
that.
even go and talk to the principal. Wouldn't go and look at the school. I mean, it topped it off because he was an anthropologist and I'm a psychologist, and so anthropologists hate psychologists, and he said, this was never going to work. And I went, okay, all right. To me, that's a non-genuine effort. He had come into the process.
Come into the process and listen to what it was and investigate it a little bit even.
I think he satisfied what his lawyer had told him was the process to attend mediation. You've attended mediation, that's all you have to do. Because he was the one that then requested the 60I certificate. And then I explained to him, well, that's fine, okay, I can issue that, but it will indicate that you didn't make a genuine effort, as much as I really find that sad that you wouldn't engage. And do you realise that then means that the other party can make a cost claim against you should the matter get in front of a judge?
It's always about the cost.
Always about the cost. And I think that's a really important thing for people to know. And a lot of lawyers are not really pushing that point, I don't think.
Well, they think of it as, again, process. Just give me the certificate.
Yes.
I have heard that come out of people's mouths. Just give me the certificate. And I was like, no, there's a process. Got to follow the process. It's not going to work. But yeah, they're like, just give me the certificate. And or when I was talking to another solicitor, it's like, but you don't have the certificate. Oh, well, we've got ways around that. And it's like, well, there are ways around it, but they have to be actual, real, not imagined.
Yes, and the ways around it is if there is severe family violence.
Right.
Absolutely.
But if there's no evidence prior to and there is nothing to say, and again, let's be very clear. They're safe in your world.
Yes.
When they come to mediation.
Absolutely.
So,
we keep people safe.
I can actually think on one hand, maybe 3 times, that I thought it was a very real issue of family violence being in the same room together.
Yeah. But then you can offer shuttle. You can have people in separate rooms, whilst our practice doesn't has our own rooms, so we don't necessarily need to use video all the time unless there's a reason for it in relation to distance. It is still an option for people. We can use some sort of video conferencing to keep people safe. The whole process, again, I tell people that my rooms were created for clients, not for the legal system. So if you're uncomfortable, let's take a break. You need to have a chat to me. You can do that. Let's go out and have a private conversation. A big part of the intake interview is finding out what triggers are going to be present. What do I have to manage for? How do I empower you to have a voice in this? Because you are doing the negotiation. Yes, I'm quite a directive mediator, and I will give people lots of information and ideas, and I'll throw things on the table. But ultimately, it's their decision. Ultimately, they have to have the conversations and decide on what is going to be drafted into this parenting plan.
That's the genuine effort part.
Yes.
That's the genuine effort part.
Absolutely.
If both parties show up and it becomes very clear to you quickly that there is an element of danger or violence or concern, you're the call maker on that.
Absolutely. That's it. And that's, again, something that some lawyers seem to get confused about. It is our job to determine whether mediation is appropriate.
Right. So you can get the certificate if it's not appropriate.
Exactly.
Based on your intake.
Based on the intake, absolutely. If clients come and mediate and then they make a genuine effort but can't reach an agreement, I can issue that certificate as well. Yep. There's one other, I can't remember what it is. But obviously I don't use it very often. It's to do with safety, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the first two are the majority of the certificates I issue. And then that enables people to initiate the process. The important part about making a genuine effort and ending up with a parenting plan, in my view, is that a signed parenting plan must be taken into consideration with any future orders that are made. Now, clarify for me. It used to be with the judge. Do registrars now take that into account now that registrars are much more hands-on?
But the registrars have more hands-on, I believe, more, again, process, procedure.
Right.
So you still have to get to what a decision maker.
Right.
So a senior judicial registrar and an interim defendant hearing.
Right.
At that level,
and
you bring those in.
I have actually had a client where the senior, it's the language, I'm not a lawyer, senior judicial registrar pointed out, well, what's wrong with these agreements? I think they're really good. And if you insist, to the solicitor, if you insist on your client continuing, I'll let the judge know that I think a cost order should be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the power they have.
But
exactly. And that's so they are there to show this is what the parties agreed on. And by the way, most of these parenting plans continue for years, a couple of years. One of the aspects that may change it is the child is now ready for school.
Yep.
Child is ready for secondary.
Oh, yep.
Maybe there's additional type of learning involved. Say, find out that the child has dyslexia or some other learning inability or disability, and now we need to address these things. Physical attributes come out between 5 and 10 years of age. I mean,
for me, if I'm starting with somebody with a very young child, the care arrangements for people under 5 are very different to care arrangements for people over 5 and 10. And so it's really important when people are looking for an FDR, somebody who has experience or expertise and understands the psychological, and emotional development of small children, because we can do a lot of damage. And that's where I think consent orders really create problems, because
I would agree.
They can't be nuanced.
They're ironed.
Yeah.
They're ironclad. They're specific.
Yeah.
They're, do not deviate orders.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can create, there are going to be situations, what happens with. Now, sometimes they'll throw something, a language into the order that says, if the parents cannot agree, then by default, this will be how they do it.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, if they can't agree, here's how it's going to happen. But that's the encouragement to agree first.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, theoretically speaking. How you want to pursue that, that's a different story. But I think it really comes down to people need to understand that the parenting orders aren't flexible.
No.
And with the new changes that have come through May 6th, they're not going to be easily changed.
No.
And like you said, significant. And we have yet to really see what that means.
Yeah.
Whether it's somebody's moving an hour away, somebody's moving, different states. Is that a dramatic change? It can be based on the situation. But for the most part, what we're looking at is that just having some flexibility, because children need flexibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Parents need to understand that, it's not their world. As much as they want it to be.
You're inflicting this situation on your children.
Which, as a parent and a grandparent, I'm good with sometimes. I had a situation with my granddaughter at one point, and we're in the car and she's in the back seat, and I asked her a question and she didn't respond, and I was like, third time I asked, I was like, I need you to respond, and she's like, I did, I shook my head, and I was like, I don't have eyes in the back of my head to see you, and then this little voice in the back, sometimes you do. And I was like, all right,
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Absolutely. No, she called you out.
She did. She did. And she was, I think, 5. She will be 18 soon. It does not change.
Oh, scary.
But that's what I mean. So, the parenting plans can be nuanced, can be flexible. They change with the situations of the child because those change.
Yeah.
And
Mum and Dad repartner. How are you going to manage that? How do you talk to the kids about new partners? It's just...
Yeah, there's some books out there, but who wants to read a book? It's like, I'm dealing with it now. I don't have the time.
Yeah, yep.
But if I can go to a mediator who has that background and can help us wade through the muck, because it's muck. There's nothing clear when it comes to kids.
No. And every family is different. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is so true. And every parenting plan really should be designed for that family.
Yeah,
I'm trying to do one at the moment for, and I've done a few of these where there's a FIFO, fly in, fly out.
Yeah,
and
that is a strange concept to me, by the way.
Yeah,
coming from the States.
Yeah,
it's like, what's a FIFO? Yes, and why is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing.
And it's like it is.
Yeah.
And it, thanks to Facebook, I saw on Instagram, a thing where a guy comes home to his little 3-year-old. He's like, "That's it. I'm not doing FIFO ever again.
Yeah,
I want to stay." The kids like all hugging on him and daddy, and but it is a thing. It is a reality here. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
And if I could do it, I probably would, because I like the idea of flying away, flying back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of my parents do.
Yeah, exactly.
it works for them, but
Yeah.
for others, it makes things far more complicated. And when you've got, you've got to work around the professions of both parents, as much as mum and dad have to adjust their thinking.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the kids adjusting their. It should be mum and dad adjusting their thinking. It takes a little bit of getting used to when you.
Oh, it does. My parents were ruled with an iron fist.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. That's how a lot of us grew up.
Yeah.
What they said goes, and don't you dare talk back. And
Yeah.
and now it's like the 5-year-old. I was like, oh. Well, but dang, she had a point.
Yeah.
These kids
Yeah,
are
no more do
smarter
we
and
say
smarter.
don't be a smart aleck. No,
Yeah.
it is.
But life happens.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to. You're not going to be able to guarantee against everything.
Yeah.
And so some people come in with that concrete thinking
Yep.
that says, I want this from this to this and this. That's in the best interest. And I have to stop myself sometimes because I'm reading this and it's like I'm trying to understand, because there are cultural situations as well. And there are triggers and histories for the parents. Mm-hmm. And it took us almost all the way to trial one time before the mother finally said, I almost drowned, so no, I'm not swimming. And I'm not taking the children to be in the water with them to go swimming.
Oh, understandable.
But yeah, why did she wait a year to tell me? we could have managed that issue
Much earlier.
But again, it was so traumatic to her. And I'm kicking myself going, I should have known there was a reason, because she was so adamant and she was so vocal. And why didn't, so I'm beating myself up. Why didn't I pick up that clue?
Because that's not your job.
Well, maybe not.
If
but
clients don't give you the information, it's a little, second guessing is not good either.
No, but at the same time, life happens. And I think I'm constantly telling my folks, it's like there are going to be changes. The child's only 3 now. There's going to be changes at 5, 6, 9, 10, 12.
One of the worst consent orders I ever saw. It started when the girls were really little, like single digits, and then every 12 months and then every few years, and Mum had brought them back to mediation. The girls were now mid-teens.
Oh, teens.
Yes. And these girls
element.
just did not want to do this anymore. They just did not want to do it. And it's not because they didn't love Dad. They just have other priorities.
Which they do.
Yes.
Especially as teenagers.
And
you're never one of them.
just could not get his head around it exactly. And it was a really difficult matter that I wasn't able to mediate. He just, again, came in with that concrete thinking. So where they ended up, I don't know. But, trying to help parents understand you cannot drag a kicking and screaming 13 or 14-year-old into a car. I mean, that is also juxtaposed to the notion that you don't allow your children to choose whether they go to the doctor or to school or to the dentist.
Yeah,
but how do you navigate that? How do you manage that? And I don't think consent orders give you any tools to navigate or manage that, whereas having a mediator in your team can help you with those tools.
And that's you hit upon that, because I think that's exactly how I look at you. You're a team member. We have a team.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are people that's like, look, it has been traumatic for you. I'm asking you to seek, counseling, therapy. Go get that 8 to 10 sessions from your GP, because you can do that here in Australia.
Yep.
For mental health plans. I love that. I think that's so amazing. There are a lot of things that are amazing about Australia. That's another show.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can say, look, this is traumatic. This has, and it is. Don't discount it, is what I tell folks, male or female.
Yeah.
Don't discount it. This is a death.
Yep.
In many ways.
Yep.
And we
You're
have to
going through
figure out how to
grief.
create the phoenix and rise you up. You know, let's get you. But it is
Nice
traumatic.
dramatic visual.
I know. It's a California part of me coming out.
Yeah.
You know, we're dramatic.
So I suppose in closing,
Yes,
both documents have their place.
they do, and value.
Absolutely. But it shouldn't be a decision based on whether one is enforceable or not.
I'd rather it not be.
Yeah,
There are going to be enough times where that will be the case.
Yeah.
That, you know, I recognize that. But again, I think people need to understand that there is that option. There is that option. Take advantage of that option as much as you can. If it doesn't work, you can say you tried, and then we go to the
exactly.
hardball. You know, but
The steps and the process. And don't second guess because you try to have a conversation with your former partner and they go, no, 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 no. Don't second guess that your mediator won't be able to overcome those obstacles. You know?
there are conversations you can have that because they're part of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
I mean, there are conversations that somebody can have with somebody else that they are not going to be able to have with you.
Exactly.
And you can't take that as a negative.
I call it the white noise phase.
Well, there we go.
Yeah. But maybe that's a whole other conversation. We'll talk about
That
the
may
white
be
noise
as
phase.
well. But on that note,
Yes.
remember, this is a process. There are good aspects, there are challenging aspects, but you get to make those choices,
Yeah.
but make them informed.
Yeah, and that's why we're here, to help inform choices.
Yep. There we
Knowledge is
go.
power. So again, thank you.
Thank you for listening and watching, and we will catch you on the next time.
We will.